us today will be able to see it later. We've received quite a few requests, for people to record it. It's nice to see you all. Today is Fielding's Giving Day, December 1. It's part of the global movement to support with giving and charitable contributions, the causes that you like. It's been a tough year for everyone, and we thought one way to give back to our Fielding community and thank everyone for their tireless support, and especially our alums who, beyond giving, also provide their expertise, continue to come back and engage with us. So this is an opportunity for us to also give back to our alumni. You can see the beautiful Merlot color Fielding branded fleece, and we also have bandanas. And if you support one of our causes during this giving campaign, you can get one of this wonderful, very warm and cozy fleeces, and so that way you will get the Fielding hug every time you put it on. And just to tell you how much love we have received to date, we are 10 o'clock Pacific time, and Fielding is already beyond $15,000 from the contributions, and every gift counts. Every gift together, they're making a great support for student scholarships and student research, and especially in this time, it's much needed and much appreciated. So thank you very much. And in this moment of time, I am pleased to introduce our chair of the Alumni and Development Working Group, trustee and alum, Dr. John Bennett.
Well, good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. So I was trying to channel my inner Charlie this morning, and so indulge me for just a moment. And I think this will, does that bring in a Charlie here? I have been accused of being Charlie Jr. from time to time, particularly when I'm acting up and acting out. And it's so good to be with all of you. And I want to acknowledge a few people that are on, and I'm fortunately, we won't have time to acknowledge everybody that's on, but there are a few people that I'd like to call particular attention to. And one is Karen Bogart, who is our trustee chair, or chair of the Board of Trustees. Karen, can you do a little wave so your image shows up? Great, thank you. And also our vice chair of the Board of Trustees is Gary Wagenheim. Gary is on, and greetings, Gary. And we also have a number of faculty that I'm recognizing here, and former Dean Charles McClintock. Charles, good to see you this morning. And I see Fred Steyer. Greetings, Fred. And I also saw Argentine Craig, who is a faculty emeritus, a great colleague in this work, and a terrific partner with Charlie. And there may be others that I'm missing, but I want to acknowledge those. I also want to acknowledge Linda Hundel, who is a board trustee emeritus. Can you wave your hand as well? Great, great. And so as we're beginning this session, our intent today is to kind of honor the work that Charlie did and the impact that he had on so many of us. And the work that he did indirectly, I think, lives on very much through so many of us and the work that we're doing with other groups. I often think about channeling Charlie when I'm working, particularly when I'm working with the group. I had the pleasure of teaching with Charlie at American University's MSOD program for a number of years, and then picking up the use of self course that he and Edie taught for many years, and taught that class with my colleague, Heather Berthude. And what a joy to pick up that work and carry it forward. I also had the privilege of having Charlie and Edie as participants in my dissertation research. So I looked at how lived experience influenced the work of scholar practitioners. And Marcia Rubin, who's on this call, was my student reader. And one of the things that Marcia noticed as we were looking at all the interview data that had come in, and by the way, I spent the most time with Charlie in the interview because Charlie had a lot to say, or at least he took a long time to say it. I'm not sure, I've never quite figured out which one of those it was. But one of the things that Marcia helped me pick up was that there were so many nuggets, and she gave me the idea of capturing them as pearls. And I had 5 participants in that research with Charlie and Edie, and so I captured the pearls of wisdom that each one of them shared. So what we want to do today is give everybody a chance to speak as much as possible and to share some of your recollections. But before we do that, I want to turn to our president, Dr. Katrina Rogers, to give a few comments as well, and then we'll come back to me and I'll share with you a little bit, and then we've got a special treat for you as well. So, Katrina.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Trustee Bennett. I was really excited this morning to get up thinking, what would Charlie say and do? And I wish I had red suspenders, and I couldn't find a red hat. So here I am, just showing up, because Charlie wouldn't have minded that at all. And I was really reflecting on how, when I first came to Fielding, Charlie's, one of his signature items was to have long check-ins with his student groups. And I remember sitting in one of his student groups, and I have to tell you, I was a bit, maybe I don't know if cynical is the word, but I was a little skeptical of this check-in idea, being more of a task-oriented person and coming from a different culture. But he really persuaded me, just by his being, Charlie's being, the importance of the connections that people make with each other, and how the relationships that we build together are as important as the work that we accomplish. And it really struck me at a deep level over time that I've been at Fielding now, as I move into my 16th year of being at Fielding and my 8th year of being Fielding's president. And I think about Charlie more now than ever, in a sense, because I think about the wisdom that was very much present, but also underneath that hail fellow, well met persona that he had, and how much he attracted people to the whole understanding of what it means to be a lifelong learner. And also, Charlie always made me laugh, and how much I appreciated that about him, and how much wisdom I see every day in the people, in all of us, as we embody many of the things that Charlie was. And I often think about when I'm starting, let's say, a new group, for instance, a new student group, or I'm within a group in a group dynamic, and I think about, what is it that I can do? What is my agency here that I can do to help move this group along? I saw Charlie do that a lot, and sometimes in subtle and often in overt ways. And I think about just the power of that, right? To be understanding of a group dynamic, and then to be able to move it, right? To find the spark, the catalyst, asking the right question, or interjecting a comment that just changes the whole frame. And that is so key to the essence of what human and organizational development is. And I think it just speaks well of our community that we've set aside this time today to have this discussion and this opportunity to be together in community. And with that, I just want to say thank you. I'm looking at all these wonderful, familiar faces. I feel like I'd like to have deep conversation with each and every one of you, but I'm going to turn it back over to John for the rest of our time together. Thank you.
Thank you, President Rogers. And thank you for your leadership in all the crises of the world and the stability that Fielding brings to so many people. So thank you for all that you're doing and the team that you lead. There are a few people that have joined that I also want to recognize. 2 board members. One is Mike Goldstein. If you'll raise your hand, Mike, and wave. Glad to see you today. And also a faculty member, representative on the Board of Trustees is Dorothy Agargupta. And if you can, yeah, great, welcome, great. And I'm also seeing Kimberly Seashore. So one of Charlie and Edie's daughters. So, good morning. Great. And did Becky join us? I don't know if Becky was able to join us. I can't see her. Not seeing Becky. Okay. Kim, thank you for being here. And I hope that if you want to share some things that you'll take a moment to do that as we get started here in just a moment. So I'll give you that opportunity if you want it. I pulled a few slides, and this comes from a wonderful resource, and we're going to get to hear from the two compilers of this, one being Joyce and the other being Lewin, and we want to give you a chance to just reflect for a moment on some of the things that Charlie was kind of known for, and that we appreciated about Charlie and the life that he brought for so many of us, whether we were engaged in whatever activity with Charlie. And as we think about this session today, I'm reminded of one of Charlie's phrases that we use so often, and I still use, is we're going to do something, something's going to happen, and then we're going to do something else. So as we get started today, we're going to do something, and we'll see what happens as we get through this. So again, thank you to both Lewin and to Joyce, who will have a chance to speak in just a moment. But I've pulled some slides together from a book that they put together. Some of you on this call contributed to that, and it was What Would Charlie Say? A tribute to the wisdom of Charlie Seashore. So let me see if I can get my slides going here, and we'll just show you. I'm not going to read these. You can read them for yourself. There's some images as well as some phrases. So. I think you're going to love this one. So I'll turn it over to Joyce and Lewin to share some thoughts. You pulled together that wonderful resource that's available if, and you can talk about how that can be accessed if you want to get it. So Joyce,
okay,
Lewin.
All right. Well, I'm going to begin the story and Luann's going to finish it. I was fortunate enough to have Charlie as a member of my dissertation committee. And in that role, he certainly did lots of things for me, both on a personal level as well as on an intellectual level, up to and including giving me the conceptual framework for my dissertation. Ours was not necessarily an easy relationship around my dissertation. Charlie, for those of you who know him, know that he was into elegance and brevity. And I was kind of into clutter and verbosity. So I got lots of feedback from Charlie on what I was submitting to him. And at the same time, I was getting feedback from my other committee members. And I noticed that when they responded to me, in many instances, I would get so angry that I would have to put the dissertation down for 2 or 3 days and then come back to the comment and begin to deal with it. Charlie, however, could look at exactly the same item, make a comment. I immediately heard what he was trying to tell me, and I'd pick it up and start doing the work that needed to be done. So I began to realize it was the way he framed the feedback that was really speaking to me. One of my jobs is teaching government, and so I get to read lots of undergraduate papers on government. And as I was reading those papers, I would begin to sit there and think, I wonder how Charlie would respond to this. Now, this was in the time of the What Would Jesus Do movement. And so that question evolved into what would Charlie say, which is the WWCS. And it was coming up on time for my graduation. So I decided that my graduation gift to him would be a t-shirt, the red t-shirt you saw him wearing in some of the slides, and some of these bracelets with WWCS on them. Well, the day that I gave the items to him, he was doing a workshop, and you saw some images from that workshop. One of the people in that workshop was Luann Fortune. And so Luann's going to pick up the story from there.
Joyce, thank you. And thank you, everybody, because this book that she's speaking of was an effort that resulted from many of you here in this circle today. So Charlie was my cluster mentor. He was my wise, sage professor. He was my friend. And over the 5 years that I worked with him at Fielding, I felt like I became part of the family at Charlie and Edie. So when Joyce came up with this t-shirt idea, it seemed to me a moment of Charlie's synchronicity, and also in a moment of playfulness, putting out feelers as to who might want to contribute to a tribute, which you did. You came forward with statements and ideas and pictures and sharing. And we decided one of my favorite stories was that we need some graphics to accompany. And you all might remember that Charlie collected chickens or birds, like this little guy behind me right now. So we brought Edie in on the story, and she said you could get into our condo and take pictures of all of Charlie's birds. And we timed it with her. When she was away, we were going to get into the condo, and I took pictures of tons of birds. So we got there on the day. James, the concierge, let me in after I explained I was there, and Edie, of course, had let him know at that point that I was there to take pictures. And I went on upstairs, took out my camera, and spent about an hour posing the birds around and taking all sorts of pictures of them. And then when I was ready to leave, I told James that I appreciated him letting in, and he could let Edie know we were done. And he said, "Oh, Edie never called me." So Charlie's family extended to all of us, so that even his neighbors knew that we were always welcome there. And I'd just like to take one more second to read what Charlie wrote, because the day we presented him this book, I saw him in one of his rare moments of being speechless. And he took one of the books and the next morning returned it to me with this inscription: "Luann, there are no words to express the joy that you have brought into this season of my ebbing career. It sits on top of the most meaningful opportunities we have had to explore the intersection of personal and professional development. Lots and lots of love, Charlie. And in my work, Charlie is with me every day, and in my heart, he always will be. Thank you all for being part of it. John, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And what a great way of helping us remember some of those wisdoms and quirkies that I think Charlie brought to us, which were part of who he was and the character that he gave joy to serious things. And I think that's a nice balance. Let me turn to Kimberly, who wants to share a little bit. So Kimberly Seashore.
Good morning. So first of all, thank you for inviting us. My sister Becky is also here, and I'm going to toss the baton to her briefly after I just say a word or two. So you guys knew a very professional side of Charlie, and we got to see that professional side because fielding was always in our house. My mother dubbed fielding the fielding mice when I was a teenager, because one of my favorite stories was recalling coming out of the Jack and Jill bathroom that was between me and my sister's room with a towel wrapped around me and two people in a very serious conversation on my bed. And one of them looking up and saying, can you give us a moment? This is very important. And I thought, you're in my bedroom and I'm naked. Like, what could be more important? And that was sort of a moment of realizing that his public life and his private life were always intertwined. I have been thinking about both my father and fielding a lot in the past several months. I am a professor or assistant professor at San Francisco State University in the math department, and we have all been hugely challenged to figure out how to take the in-person relationships that we have and the connections and move online and do all of our teaching online. And I realized that I draw on my parents both in my work, that relationships are always more important than the math that I teach. And figuring out how to make those relationships work online has been tremendously challenging for me professionally and also personally. And every time I think this just isn't possible, like I can't make the connections with students that I used to be able to make, I think in the 80s, when there was no internet, fielding made that possible. And my father did that and pioneered that work in a time when nobody even knew that was a thing. So get up and do it again and see if you can figure it out. And I wish you were here helping us all figure it out, but I'm tremendously grateful to all of you for showing us that humanity and this world of the internet don't have to be in conflict, and that there is a way to transcend what feels so tremendously dehumanizing in these days, with just kind of humanity and interest and the desire to make the connections. So I kind of wanted to particularly share that with the fielding community right now. The one other thought that I wanted to make was that I think my father actually he struggled a lot, and he was somebody who had a lot of concerns and conflicts and worries and anxieties. And he did that while still just kind of putting out there this kind of bravado and generosity and fun. And I find that's also really inspiring to me right now, that I feel like in the midst of struggle, you can also just sort of fake it and have a great day, and that others will come along with you and join in that party. So those are some thoughts that I wanted to share. I will pass it to my sister, I think. Beck?
Yeah, I'm here, sorry.
Cool.
Technology, not my strong point, at least, I should say screen technology, not my strong point. Mechanics, more my thing. But anyway, I just wanted to, first of all, so great to see so many faces and names that I remember, and others that I maybe did and have forgotten, apologies, and some that I haven't yet and surely would have by now had my parents still been on the earth in the way that they were. But anyway, I do have a little show and tell, which is, you won't get a good view of it, but let's see if I can get it up to the screen. Whoops.
What would Charlie
say? That is his very own sweatshirt that I have still. and keep with me and wear frequently, because when I need the cloak of my dad around me, and it's hanging in there, you know, it's a little worn out. Oh, the back, I should say, some of you I'm sure have seen it, but dip me in chocolate and call me dessert. I'd worry about getting older if I wasn't so damn sexy. So that's a sweatshirt. We have other things from, you know, other members of the family that we hang on to. I don't have my teddy bear from childhood. I'm not even sure I ever did have one, but the sweatshirt is kind of that. And I virtually extend it to all of you. When you need it, feel free to imagine wearing it. If you really need it, contact me and I'll FedEx it to you. You can borrow it. That's what Dad would do, not what he would say.
Exactly right. Thank you both. It's so good to have you with us. And I want to acknowledge, I believe Argentine was able to get in touch with you and extend the invitation. And I appreciate your doing that and joining us today. Now, here's where the chaos will begin. And I want to give you an opportunity. I know that a lot of people said that they would want to speak, and we had no idea how many people were going to show up for today. And we have almost 50 people on the call. And so what I'm going to attempt to do is, if I've done the math right, we want a little bit of closing at the end. So I'm guessing that we have about 50 minutes, and we're going to extend over into a half hour, if beyond the original invitation for an hour. If you can stay, you're welcome to join. And what I'm going to ask is that we do this by birth month. So those who were born in January will have an opportunity for about maybe 2 people to speak very briefly. And if we do this correctly, then about half the group will have gotten the chance to speak. So I'm going to ask, as Charlie would say, one of his favorite phrases that I continue to use is brief and deep. Brief and deep. We would use that when people would do a check-in or a check-out so that they didn't go on and on and on, but we want to be brief and deep. And I'll ask if somebody whose birth month was January, if you want to speak up, I'll just ask you to jump in here and share, realizing that we want other people to be able to share. So maybe a minute or 2. And let's see who was born in January that wants to say something.
I was born January 3rd.
Wow,
You know,
go for it, Michelle.
Here's the Charlie quote I hear in my head frequently. What would you do if you were an adult? And that's all I need sometimes, is to hear that voice.
Thank you.
John, I was born in January, at the other end of it, January 30th. And if I can share the screen, I have a picture of Charlie that I think people will appreciate.
All right, I think you can.
Can you do it, Dr. Agargupta?
Yeah, I can. Those of you who were there know the fish story. Whoops, sorry about that. Let me go back to Charlie. And this picture was taken by Niels. This is the fish story that Charlie was part of. And then this picture. And so just glad to be able to share those 2 pictures.
Thank you. Somebody else born in January? All right, then let's go to February. Who from February would like to share? Ruth, go ahead, please.
February 8th. And I particularly liked, John, how you said that Charlie lived on in many of us. And there are 2 Charlie stories that I have told to students for the last 20 years. And one is Fluff Your Aura, where he would just take that, his white hair, and fluff it. And my students, they just get amazed of the energy that can create in them and the appreciation of self. And the second thing is his very famous line, "Who are all those people living rent-free in your head?" Who are all those people living rent-free in your head? It's your real estate. If you don't like those voices, kick them out. And those are two things that have kept me going and that I have loved to share with others. So thank you for doing this, everyone.
Who else in February? All right, well then we'll move on to March.
Okay, March 2nd.
All right, Marcia.
Yeah, so similar to the one before, I teach graduate students, and about a month ago, one of my students said, can you send us a reminder every week of when our assignments are due? I looked at the class on Zoom and I said, you know, I had this wonderful professor and he used to say, what would you do if you were an adult? And they kind of just, I think they got it. So they didn't ask me that anymore, but that's something that I recall a lot. And I also use Charlie's use of self article, which I love and the students love it too.
And we're fortunate that we have Mary Nash on this call, who's one of the authors of that article as well. So
right. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's getting a lot of mileage.
Yeah, it does. I use it as well. Anybody else in March?
I'm a March birthday, John.
Right,
so nice to see all of you. I've been touched by so many of the expressions here today. I always think about Charlie as he could make you feel like the ultimate insider. And the question, I had an opportunity to work with Charlie and Edie in a number of settings in my corporate career and both as teacher and mentor. And I'm always taken away with, you know, how's that working for you? And such an invitation. So thanks.
Anybody else in March? All right, then let's go to April. I have a feeling there's a lot of births in the latter part of the year. So there's something that tells me that we're going to pick up here and have more speakers here as we get towards the end of the year. But how about April? Who was born in April?
Hey, John, Gail here.
Yeah.
I'll go. Well, first of all, I brought a couple of Charlie artifacts with me to this meeting today. They came down with me from Delaware. One is a rock. If you can see it, it says clarity. And there was a point I was struggling with my dissertation, and so we had a long conversation about clarity. And so he said, take it with you as a reminder to just stay focused and be clear. And he also said to me, feel free to pass it on to others if they need it. So let me know if you need some clarity. The other one is this little thing. I have no idea what it is, but I was having trouble writing. And he said, I want you to go in and just stay in and don't come out. And he kept doing this, don't come out, just stay in there. I said, all right. So anyway, I brought these down with me from Delaware. My Charlie statement that I use a lot in my work is just let it breathe. Just let it breathe. And I find that very helpful when I'm working with students or leaders or myself. Just let things breathe. Don't be in a rush. And so that's the one that has been a good one for me. Thanks.
Very good.
I got one.
Yeah.
April, or two. One of them that I use all the time, just in many settings is, and we came on late, so maybe somebody already said this, but feedback is always about the person giving it and only sometimes about the person receiving it. And that one seems to be really land for people a lot and say a whole lot about communication in a very few words. And the other one that I don't think, this one we don't talk about, we privately, is one of the best comments I got on my dissertation was quit the foreplay and just say it. I was I tell you, it made me way more direct in my communication in general, for better or worse. So those are, and then the last thing is, you all must remember, is Charlie with obviously with his red hat, but hiding behind palm trees in the lobby of the hotel and playing peekaboo with us. That was just really sweet. So that's it.
Great. Anybody else in April? Right, how about May? Who's born in May that wants to talk? Certainly, somebody was born in May.
I think we missed Erica Fitcher in April.
Oh, okay. Erica, speak up.
Hi, everyone. Erica Victor here. And I just wanted to say I did not have the opportunity to know Charlie. I have been part of the fielding community for not quite 2 years now, and I've heard so much about him and really wanted to be a part of this to just get a better feel for him, because he clearly had a bigger than life personality. So I just want to thank you all for allowing me to be here and absorb some of these things. I have already heard the, what would you do if you were an adult, from actually Dr. Agragupta told me about that in an event a few weeks ago, and it stuck with me. So, and just from all of your stories, it's a shame I didn't have the opportunity to know him, but I just appreciate being here and being able to absorb him, because he was clearly such a big part of fielding culture and history. So I just wanted to say that, and thanks for letting me be here.
Anyone in May? And let's go to June.
Hi, John. It's Bart Bather here. Sorry I don't have my face being projected, so apologies for that. I just wanted to throw out, I'm sorry?
I said we're hearing your voice.
Okay, great. I just want to throw out one of my best memories was the final Bethel Systems KA in Maine in 2009. And I wish I'd sent these photos. I have so many photos of that final Systems KA up in Bethel, Maine. In the middle of February, it was like 10 below. And I know it was especially bittersweet for both Charlie and Edie, because it was the final. It's where they started the NTL, and I have so many pictures from that Systems KA. Fred Steyer. It was a wonderful session. And towards the end, I sat down to Charlie, next to Charlie, and I was really working up to, I didn't know how busy he was. I was really working up to ask him to serve on my committee. And he looks at me, big smile, and he's like, well, Barb, I wish I could, but I can't. But I'll tell you what I will do. I'll tell you how to manage your committee. And so we got a good laugh out of it. So he very graciously, begged out of helping me on my dissertation, but he offered to manage my committee with me, which I never did take him up on it. But it was just, the whole Bethel, Maine was just a wonderful, wonderful memory, in spite of the cold. So that's all.
Good. Thank you.
I'd like to go, John.
Yes, please, Charles.
Charlie and I used to play a game with each other where we would say one word that expressed something that we were feeling at a governance retreat or someplace. And it was always fun because usually we didn't know what the other person meant. So the fun was exploring, well, what do you mean by that one word? The one word that pops into my mind today is woodwork. Only Charlie could have drawn 75 fielding people out of the woodwork, and people who I haven't seen in years, and who it's absolutely fabulous to see. And I think he would be so pleased about that. And I do want to recommend, I don't know, Elena, if there's any way we can send to people who are on this call today, the article that Mary Nash wrote about Charlie, because it really is a wonderful piece, a wonderful compliment to the book that Joyce and Luann put together. And so if there's a way to do that, let's do that. And I want to just share one photograph as well. How do I do that, John?
Yeah, you should be able to go to share screen.
Okay.
Down at the bottom, and
wait a minute. I'll go down to the bottom. Yep.
Things that should be accessible to you. While Charles is doing that, I'll also mention, oh, there we go.
So this was Charlie at a session at the Fest Parker, getting a foot something or other and a pedicure. You know, what could be better?
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I stopped sharing. Is that right?
That share, yes, that should do it.
Oh dear, how do I do that?
I'll be at the top.
At the top.
Yep, where it says viewing.
Oh yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, good. While you're mentioning the article that Mary wrote, I'd also mention that Fred Steyer is on, and Fred wrote a piece about the systems in the Fielding book that Elena is holding up. And then there are a series of articles that were in a special issue last year of the International OD Journal. The entire issue was about Charlie and Edie and their work. So you may be of interest in that as well.
So June 1st, can I go? Hi. So, uh-oh. Now my dog is the one who wants to make the comments. So I actually met Charlie and Edie about 20 years before either of us went to Fielding, which is quite a few years before Fielding even existed. I was an undergraduate at Springfield College, and NTO was running labs called the Higher Education Lab. And I was selected as a member of a student administrator faculty team to go to this lab. And that was the big, that was such a big moment in my life, but I didn't come to appreciate that until quite some time later. One of the things that I learned from Charlie as I started doing, I've just skipped way ahead. I went to work for the YMCA after undergraduate school. I did more NTL labs. And so most of my time with Charlie was through NTL and not with Fielding. And Charlie came to Fielding I think his first summer session was the year that I graduated. So I've had many different times and places and relationships with Charlie, but one of the most memorable things I learned from him, and I think this is going to show up backwards, although maybe I don't have a screen, I have an artifact. And if you can read backwards, this is my Morton Salt Box sign. It's a metal sign. I learned from him the Morton Salt Box theory, which is the metaphor for me of how patterns work in organizations. And forever, it has been one of the most foundational principles of the work that I did as an OD person. And I also have a folder. I have an enormous file cabinet, which you can't see, but it's over my left shoulder. And one of the folders in it, there it is. It just says Charlie Seashore on it. So all the papers he wrote, all the articles, all the fun things, all of them had a huge impact on me. And of all the things that I've saved from over the years, that's one of the folders.
Thank you, Tracy. Let's move to July. Summer. Who was born in July that wants to share?
John, I'm speaking out of turn. I just want to say that Kimberly just told me how to post the article by Mary Nash in the chat box, so it should be posted there.
Great, thank you.
So I'm I'm end of July, the 24th, and good to see everybody and great to be here, and thank you for doing this. I was just thinking of a time post-graduation. I graduated in 2005, but a few of us had come back to a session in Alexandria that Charlie was running on in-group and out-group. And I started out in the in-group, but then when he put me out of the group and did some debrief following that, he said to me, "So Janet, how did it feel to be in the out group?" And I said, well, not so bad, Charlie. I've been on my smartphone and I've sent a couple of texts and received answers back. And he was just flabbergasted. I think that was early smartphone use and texting and all of that. But it was one of the few times that Charlie didn't have a retort. And so I will always remember that moment and just the laughter. But it was really wonderful to be associated with Charlie and to have him make the way always easier. And I'm grateful to him for that. Good to be with you. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'll go next. I'm just after Janet in July 28th. So I found myself, as I was thinking about this time that we were going to have together, I spent some time thinking about so many memories and fun stories about Charlie. But the one that I think stands out the most for me is one of those many national sessions in Santa Barbara, January one year. I was in the middle of my dissertation and I had a really rough few months heading into that session, and I was going to be meeting with my committee, and I'd kind of hit a crossroad where I was considering just stopping my program and letting things rest where they were. And I was in tears and on the phone with Charlie in his hotel room, telling him what had happened and what I was thinking, and pretty wrapped up in my upset. And Charlie stopped me and he said, "Tammy, hold on just a minute. Before you go any further, I have a visual for you." So I stopped and he said, "Just imagine me sitting in my hotel room in my boxer shorts with my feet on the desk and my face covered in shaving cream." And of course I burst into laughter and it took me out of my seriousness. And I think so many times that Charlie, one of the many gifts that he had was to help me take myself a little less seriously, have a good time, and think more clearly when things were difficult. And then one other quick, I love the idea of sharing pictures. So I'll share a quick picture. The last time I saw Charlie was in May of 2007, I believe, when we were gathered in Santa Barbara to celebrate the life of another great faculty member at Fielding, Will McWhinney. And I saw a lot of folks from this group. Actually, there are a few of you who were there at that time, but it's hard to believe that the last time I saw Charlie was in May of 2007, but this is one of my most cherished pictures because it was the last time I saw him. So thank you. Thanks for arranging this. This is wonderful to have these gatherings periodically. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else in July? We'll move to August. All right, how about August? Now we're really in the heat of the summer.
Before we move into August, can we get Wendy Frazier? You missed her as a May person.
Sure, I didn't see you hear you speaking up. Go ahead, Wendy, please.
Oh, too, no worries. Thanks, Gwen, because I have to scoot in a few minutes. I just wanted to share that my experience with Charlie is that he lived this not just in the learning community. My family was traveling through Baltimore to go visit some in-laws in upstate New York, and Charlie and Edie invited us to have dinner on our way through. And my kids were 10 and 7 at the time, and my husband. And, before we were sitting around the table, but before we could eat, he wanted to do a check-in. Both he and Edie did. And, the kids loved the check-in. And my husband's looking at me like, well, okay, let's just eat. And they're like, well, check in. And it was just delightful to experience something that I feel in Fielding and in the OD world, but to watch them walk that talk with everything was pretty powerful. And the one Charlieism that I haven't heard yet that I'm reminded by is the lab is always open and the game is always in play. Something like that. Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. August?
Can I go, John?
Yes, Linda.
It's Linda.
Please.
So one of my most vivid memories of Charlie was at a summer session, and he came up into the front of the group in his bathrobe with his hat And he threatened to disrobe if people wouldn't give money to Fielding for something that he was raising money for. I swear it was the best fundraising ploy I have ever seen. People, I don't know how much money was raised, but people were really giving it. My colleagues from the board of trustees will know that I always end up on the Fielding board committee that's about alumni and development. For me, I love the alumni piece. I want to stay and be re-engaged as a lifelong learner, but I always end up having to do the fundraising as well. And I hate fundraising. So I learned a new Charlieism today that I hadn't heard before, and that was the one about who are all those people living in rent-free in your head. And the reason I hate fundraising is that I think people won't like me if I ask them for money. Today is Giving Tuesday. We are on a call remembering a wonderful, generous man. And I am hoping, no, let me change this. I'm not hoping, I am asking that all of you contribute on this Giving Day. The people left my head, I'm feeling better about it. Thanks.
Very good, and thank you, Linda, for asking as well. So I think Charlie would never be ashamed to ask somebody for something if he needed it. So, good. Anyone else in August?
This is Becky Reese.
Yes, Becky.
So I have a couple really deep gratitudes for Charlie. I was able to participate in the final systems KA workshop that was done, which was actually done in Virginia at the home, I forget the name of it, but at the home of one of the alumni who had built an institute down there and bed and breakfast kind of thing. And I had not even matriculated yet at Fielding. I had been participating for 6 months in the local cluster, but because he was talking about the KA, the systems KA that was coming in, and systems was my primary interest, I got bold and asked him, well, I'm actually not going to the orientation until March, and this is happening in February. Can I go? And it worked out that he made it possible for me to do that, despite the fact that there might have been some policy things with Fielding where that wasn't quite kosher. But we worked out the payment kind of things and other things like that later. That was the most memorable and most awesome KA and experience that I have ever had. And I really appreciate Fred Steyer was the co-presenter there. I just wish that could be reconstituted and people could have that experience again. It was the embodiment of living systems as a way to learn about systems and apply theory and whatnot. And it was just awesome. And the other thing that I remember about, so unconventional and making things happen, yes, and I'm really deeply grateful to him for that, because there would not have been another chance later. That was the last one he did. And the other thing that I remember is in cluster meetings where he was so charismatic that people just came to be in his presence. And at the very first cluster meeting I attended, he got the Venn diagram out with 3 pieces of it and asked me, who was just sort of still exploring what Fielding might be, what the 3 components of my dissertation would be. And we explored it with me as the example. And out of that, I recognized that what I had proposed initially was not something that actually really interested me. And so it steered me off of something that I was thinking would be practical. And I eventually did do what I really wanted to do, which wasn't the one we discussed. But the other thing is, in the cluster meeting, when we were doing check-in, which was extensive, at one point, somebody was expressing something that he decided a coaching session was appropriate. And so he went and sat on the arm of the couch next to the woman. And we all became a fishbowl watching him coach, and his riveted attention on that person. And it still today to me is a really deep role model to emulate, where his attention and focus when he was talking to somebody was so complete and extensive that he wouldn't even notice anything else that was going around. And it was just an awesome thing to experience. So yeah, really, really neat. Really happy that I had the chance to know Charlie for the few years that I did.
Thank you, Becky. And when you're talking about that one-on-one work that he would do with someone in a group in teaching the use of self course, we coined the phrase that we were doing a Charlie. Whenever we you're also reminding me, Fred Steyer's on, and Fred, I hope you'll share something in a moment. Whenever your birth month is, if we haven't passed it, if we have passed it, please step in here. But Becky, you shared something that reminded me of being at a systems intensive at Bethel. And I wasn't doing the intensive, I was doing something on social psychology, and I was observing the process. And Charlie invited me to stay at the Bingham House and kind of interact with Fred and Charlie and Edie as they were running the session. And one of the things that I noticed in the first day was that they were off schedule by about 3 hours, whereas first 4 hours to be behind by 3 hours was typical Charlie. And so I made a comment to him at the break. I said, Charlie, you're behind schedule. And so we came back from the break, and he had a student get up on the chair and take the clock down and reset the clock so that the clock was reflecting where we were in the schedule. And I think that's indicative of, Charlie reframing and noticing kind of how the system doesn't have to dictate what we do, but we can have a lot more agency than we may realize. So you're saying that, Becky, reminded me. All right, anybody else? September? Should we go to September?
I'm an August baby, and I'll make this brief and deep. I was at a early sunrise session with Charlie at NTL, and he was explaining the MBTI to folks, and he shared a story. And the saying that came out of that is that we don't change much. We just catch ourselves quicker.
Hi, Mike Goldstein. I'm right at the end of September, but I was always the youngest kid in class. But I was on the board with Charlie. I don't know if anyone else overlapped him as a board member. And the thing that was remarkable about him, he was a faculty member, was on the one hand, he was Charlie. On the other hand, there was no one on the board more intense than he, and more committed to finding the right way for the organization than Charlie. I mean, and he spoke and everybody sat there in absolute rapt attention and listened to what he said and took careful note of what he said. So, we've seen him in different perspectives, but as a board member, as a leader of the organization, he was a remarkable man.
Thank you. Others in September then?
Hi, this is Mary Jean. I'm September 9th. Yeah, and I have so many fond memories of Charlie. One in particular during a cluster, it was a cluster intensive that we had in Santa Barbara. And the way that Charlie could take a thread of conversation and then examine it was remarkable. And I remember him doing that when somebody said, Sherry Gerst, who's a dear friend, said, who am I, chopped liver? And then we examined that whole thing of being chopped liver, and I was her support person. It was amazing. And then in that next year, I was looking for committee members. So I was interviewing people in Kansas City for the summer session, and Charlie only had time at night, and we met in the bar, in the lobby bar, and had a glass of wine, and I was talking about, how difficult it was for me to write. And he said, yes, it's kind of like a parent taking a child and standing on it and having that child stand on a red ant hill. And I caught my breath because my first memory when I was 3 was when my mother took me in Florida when we were visiting relatives, inadvertently had me stand on a red ant hill. And And I remember that vividly. So from that second on, we both knew that he was going to be on my committee. And we then went and walked over to Walden Books, where they were selling the last Harry Potter book. And we purchased them together. And I got him a magic wand, and he got me a deck of tarot cards. It was just an incredible experience. So I'm blessed that I had that experience with him.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Kathy Corn.
Go ahead, Kathy.
My encounter with Charlie was at a cluster meeting, and I was very despondent over the feedback I'd gotten from my committee. And what really made it worse is that I knew the committee was right. And so Charlie, to lift my spirits, actually told the story of himself ending up in the health center at his college, having responded to feedback from his committee. So it gave me the sense that we were all in the same place. We've all experienced the same thing. So
nice. So that's I'm going to jump after you, Kathy, because it really is it time for October 1st, John?
Yeah, let's go to October 1st.
Yeah, because I know that I'll be right before Argentina, October 2nd.
Yeah.
So I just look around this screen and I think about how much joy Charlie would have from this moment, because there's three things that stand out for me. One is that Charlie saw the potential in others and held up a mirror. And he loved the way that his Charlieisms rippled among so many. And so, like others, I met Charlie in the NTL context, and it was a moment. I talked to him many, many times about fielding, and it was this moment, which ended up being 2 years before I enrolled, that I was welcoming a group at my consulting firm on a cruise ship called the Destiny. And I was leading the check-in that Charlie popped up in front of everyone and said, "The reason I am here is to convince Eileen Wasserman that it is time for her to do her doctorate." And so that was my personal experience of having that encouragement. But I hear that from so many here. And he was my bookends because he was at my final oral and recounted the story of the Destiny. The second thing about Charlie is that he was spontaneous in a very intentional way. And I was thinking about how I think the next publication that I'm happy to partner with somebody on is fielding stories from Bethel and all of the lessons learned from those spontaneous moments that Charlie did with such intention. And also the third thing is, like so many others, Charlie was there at that pivotal point of trying to identify what's the story in you that you need to tell through your research as a scholar practitioner. And my moment with Charlie was in the Philadelphia 30th Street station, where somehow we came up with the Hokey Pokey, which is the name of the article that I wrote for the special edition of the ODR. And Charlie, about 3 days later, I got stickies in the mail from Charlie that said, "The Hokey Pokey," and that's what it's all about, for those of you who know that song and that dance. And so, with that, I just want to appreciate the ripples of Charlie that live in all of us through your stories.
Very good. Thank you, Eileen. And I put the that ODR journal is posted in the chat. So whether I don't know if I was supposed to do that, I might have just broken a copyright, but somebody don't turn me in if I did that. So all right. Anybody else? So let's see. October.
John,
I think Argentine's before me and I'm October.
All right, Argentine, I'd love to hear from you.
Muted.
Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Argentine. You're on mute. Yeah. Nope. Now, there we go.
Okay. Hello, hello, hello to everybody on this screen whom I'm not seeing for many, many years, and some who I've seen recently. I love Charlie Seashore. I met him and Edie in Bethel, summer of 1980. I'm really going back now. And became a member of NTL in 85. And then became a member of the Fielding School in 90. Charlie was on the search committee for faculty for Fielding because we at that time were very interested, or Fielding was very interested in diversifying its faculty. And so Charlie was on the search committee with several students and also some administrators to search for faculty for Fielding. And Charlie was on that faculty. I think he may have chaired it, I don't know. Wherever he is, he's chairing it anyway. So he brought me into the Fielding family as a faculty person. And I was just embraced by those who were there, who already were there, like Barbara Mink and Stefano and Dorothy, you came in later, I think, after me. And Peter came in later, Peter Park. And but there was, oh gosh, I'm blocking on his name, but you know who I'm referring to. Very good friend of Charlie's, founder, almost like a founder of Fielding.
Will McQuinney?
Don Bushnell.
Was there, yeah.
Don Bushnell.
Don Bushnell, who interviewed me for the position. And so for 20 years, 1990 to year 2000, when I retired from the Fielding faculty, became an alum of Fielding, faculty emeritus actually by the Board of Trustees, and had an experience during those 10 years that were just mind-blowing and oh gosh, it was just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And the work that I did in South Africa, it was touted throughout the system, and I even was awarded the the Social Justice Award back before I retired. And once you're in the Fielding, you're just with everybody who's in Fielding. So, and I told Charlie I was retiring because I was becoming a grandmother to my daughters, my first daughter, grandchild for my daughter, and that I wanted to be nanny, Grammy nanny is what I wanted to be. And Charlie said, well, you've been assessing the KA1 human development, so all that theory, now you'll start getting some practice. And I said, oh, I don't know about that. But he wouldn't let me leave. He would not let me go. He still involved me in the seminars that we would meet, those sessions on the weekends in his condo, Edie and Charlie's condo there in Columbia, Maryland, attended by, where's Ruth? She's still on, Ruth? Yeah. And also got me involved with American NTL, American University's program, Masters in Human and Organizational Development. So then he said, we need to form an organization called the Lewin Center, because all the work that we're doing is grounded in the theory and experimentation and innovation of Kurt Lewin. And Kurt Lewin, of course, was one of the founders, one of the seeds, seminal work that was founded on the NTL. So we formed the Lewin Center in 2006, 6 years after I retired from Fielding. And he became the founder, co-founder, along with Edie, myself, Charles, Don Klein, Alan Klein, Fred Nader, and Brenda Jones. 7 of us constituted the co-founders of the Lewin Center, which is still going on today. And John became a fellow, a Lewin fellow in the organization called the Lewin Center. It's a 501c3 organization, and its purpose is to advance the teachings and the theories of Kurt Lewin, and which is grounded in most of the work that you're doing in the world, meeting and making the world a better place for all of us on social justice, social change, and social action. And you know that is Charlie. Social justice, social change, and social research. So we are carrying on, and by John, I think he was your mentor. Not only was he your mentor, but I think he chaired your committee, John?
No. He was one of the participants in my
He's a participant in your research. And of course, he introduced me to John, and John came aboard on the Lewin Center. But Charlie's reach is wide and profound, and I love him. I first met him in the 80s, and his spirit is being carried forth by every one of you here today, organized by John Bennett. And Warren Bennett, as you know, says we're all Lewinians. We're all Lewinians doing the work in the world. And John is carrying forward even at his university by having a program for Lewin scholars. Yeah, so, and the beat goes on. And during these times, we need every heart and every person whose values are social justice, social change throughout the world. Almost a pandemic, hopefully. Yeah, so that's me. And I'm wearing this hat. Do you see this hat?
Yeah.
He gave me this hat with a little thing around it. Yeah, okay. And for me to be wearing this hat means, you know, a change in my personality, because, you know, I've been perceived as being, well, you know, rather academic and following the, you know, the procedures and setting the, you know, but Charlie said, no, this is for you. So before he died, and he died, you know, gosh, 2013, yeah. 2013. And Brenda and Lennox created a beautiful, beautiful memorial service in California for him. And then, of course, the next month, Edie. And we had that ceremony in Columbia, Maryland. John was there, and of course, Becky and Kim and several people on this tribute over there in Columbia, Maryland. And,
Argentine, thank you so much for sharing and being here and helping us get this group together today. I know you played an instrumental role in getting some people to know about this. So thank you very much. I'm glad that you could.
You were the catalyst, though, John. You were the catalyst.
Let's move. I think Helen, you wanted to share, and I want to move on. We've got just a few minutes to hear from everybody, and I know some people are dropping off as we're approaching the hour and a half. But let's see. And I know I want to have some time at the end for Fred Steyer to have some comments from Elena. So we'll have about 6 more minutes, and so Helen, if you can take us through October, and then we'll move to November.
Okay, thank you, John. So Charlie was the reason I came to Fielding. I'd known him at NTL, and I didn't want to be anywhere else to do my PhD. So it was really a great experience. But my favorite memory of Charlie's interventions was in a group one day, and John, you might have been there. I don't know if Gary Wagenheim was there, but Charlie, we got into discussion about ego, and Charlie got up from the group, walked to the back of the room, and picked up the cord for his laptop. I see you nodding your head, so you know what I'm going to say. He came back and he stood on a chair, and everybody was staring at him. Nobody knew what he was going to do. He asked 2 men in the room, the largest guy in the room, to get down on their hands and knees, and he handed them the end of the cord. And he was holding one end, the guy was holding the other. And then he had another man stand behind this man and hold his hand. He said, now back up. And as they backed up, pulled Charlie off the chair and he fell to the ground. And somewhere in that process, I realized what he was doing was emulating the fall of the statue of Saddam Hussein, which had just happened. So he'd created the tank on the floor, him on the chair, pulled him off onto the floor. But his message, which I'll never forget, was, you know, when people put you on a pedestal, there's only one place for you to go. You're going to fall. And I've always taken that lesson with me. It was such a graphic illustration of what he was trying to tell us that day. So thank you, John.
That was in an intensive in Atlanta. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very
John,
good. Yes.
John, I'm an October person,
All
and I'll
right.
be real quick.
All right, great. Good to hear.
I first encountered Charlie at the orientation where there was a pile of videos, and I picked up the video about how do you choose your dissertation topic. And what he said served me so well and seems to have served some of the students I've worked with. And what he said was, most students find the best work they can do if they are trying to understand a deeply unconscious problem in their life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Yeah. So autobiographical.
Yeah. All right. How about November? Anybody in November birth that you want to share? Right. How about December? All right.
I've got an October one.
All right, Susan, go ahead.
I'll just be very quick. I shout out to Fred because one of my many memorable memories were when we did the systems intensive and got snowed in that big, huge snowstorm. The other memory that really sticks out and that's been particularly on my mind through COVID is the picture that was in the original group of the slides that were shown, and there was a flip chart that had the axis and it was blank. And I happened to have been in that session where Charlie had said the one axis was age, and I think the other one was adult development. And he had all of us take our own pen and, chart our trajectory on the chart. And it was all these different colors going this way. And then Charlie said, well, after everyone had finished, and he says, well, after doing very rigorous research, let me tell you what the real trajectory is. And he took a big black marker and went up to the flip chart and scribbled all over the place. And that has given me such a joy and a lightness of being when I felt, all over the place. And anyway, that picture of that flip chart filled in. So when I saw that blank one, that brought back a lot of memories.
Very good. I used that with a class a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's all alive, very much. Well, let's, Fred, if we can turn to you for some comments. You work very closely with Charlie on dissertation committees and workshops and intensives. So I'd love to hear what you can share.
Yeah, thanks, John. And my birthday's in January. So what this does is to give us a chance to show the continuity and ongoingness. So in fact, Charlie and I very often had trouble with calendars anyway. In fact, just, I'm looking out there and seeing so many great memories of people, although now you're, these wonderful three-dimensional versions of you that I knew at Bethel have been collapsed into these two-dimensional rectangles on Zoom. So I look forward to times when we can reconnect in person again. One thing that connects with what you were saying, John, that was special about Bethel was that, Charlie and I, many of you know this, that we were both extreme Ps on the Myers-Briggs. And the idea that we would actually be planning these sessions is kind of amusing, right? So the initial session that we did, which was back in 2000, we mapped out, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, horizontally, vertically, morning, afternoon, evening. And we said, well, that's enough. We have enough of a structure there. We can build on that. But a couple, and I'm looking at, and Susan, you remember the time that we got snowed in at Mountain Quest and had to actually cancel. And we wound up changing the session to figure out how everyone was going to be able to leave.
Right.
It was a big systems problem, and you were kind enough to drive us to, I think, the Raleigh-Durham Airport from West Virginia. But two special memories. Charlie was really the master of serious play and playful seriousness, and all of your stories evoke that. And in that chapter that I wrote in Charlie, with Charlie's memory in mind, that's in the handbook that Elena posted, two things really stood out. These were contributions by, many of you made contributions to this also, but one was in 2004 from Carrie Spell Hansen. It was a memory of how during the session, one of the participants got very ill and had to be taken to the hospital. And rather than seeing this as a disruption, what Charlie did was to say, well, systems is really all about caring. And the rest, completely forgetting about the structure that we had set up, the rest of the session was about thinking about systems of caring and how we need to be there for each other and take care of the person who had fallen ill. It completely transformed the session, but it became so much more of a meaningful experience. Another in Mountain Quest, when after Bingham House was sold, thank you, Kimmy and Becky, and Gearing House also was no longer possible for us to meet, and we had moved to Mountain Quest, which Becky, you remembered, it was Alex and David Bennett that owned it, two Fielding alums. There was a giant cuckoo clock in the room, and those of you who were there, I'm sure you remember that went off on the hour. And we didn't know that this was going to happen. The first time it was a total disruption. I think Edie may have been talking about early days at NTL. It might have been Jane Jorgensen. We actually had two couples talking about family systems. It was a big disruption. And what Charlie did was to say, this is fantastic. Let's take this as an opportunity to create our own ritual. And what happens that after that, every time on the hour that the clock went off, we were to get up, do a little dance, turn around, and then sit down. And what Charlie and Keith Early, one of the, I don't know if Keith is on this call, and I actually wrote about this as his vivid memory of Bethel, but how to take something that was a disruption and transform it into a ritual that brought us all together. Nothing that we were talking about was so important that it couldn't be disrupted by the cuckoo clock and little dance around the cuckoo clock. So if we were in the same room together, I would invite us all to get up, do a little dance around, although knowing in Zoom, we may have only our, waist up Zoom outfits on right now. So maybe that's not such a great idea, but Charlie would have said that's okay. But just such a wonderful example of grasping the moment, creating a ritual, and allowing us to learn and to be together. So such great memories. And thanks, John, for giving us some time to say something.
Thank you, Fred. And I think what you also are bringing forward is, if we think about what would Charlie say, Charlie would say what was appropriate to say in the moment, and he would use what was in the room. He would use what was showing up in us and what was showing up in him. And I think that spontaneity, that creativity, that innovation is all about meeting people where they were. And as we think about all the trouble that's going on with triple pandemics in our environment, I think about what would Charlie say, and what comes up for me is he would say, notice what's happening and notice what we can do to make the world a better place. And not only think about it, but act on it. And so I appreciate you all coming together today for us to celebrate. And I also want to bring out that we're not just celebrating Charlie, because as the saying goes, there's Edie, where is Charlie? Yeah. And so I just want to bring back Charlie and Edie.
Yes.
Oh, from the memorial service in Baltimore. And it sits on my desk. And it sits, some of you may who know me well, a colleague of mine gave me this a few years ago as a birthday gift that says note, because I have a hard time saying note. And so on my desk, and I'm reminded of Charlie and Edie and my need to say no. Yeah. So I hope you'll say yes to fielding. And I'm going to turn it over to Elena for some closing words. And again, thank you all for joining us. And I'm so glad to be connected and see so many familiar faces and people that I don't know come together to celebrate the life and work of Charlie and Edie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bennett. Thank all of you for coming today and for making this Giving Day a blast. We're way past $20,000 just in today. And I know many of you support other causes at Fielding, but we also the Seashore Scholarship already received so much love, and thank you. This is tremendous. I'll be in touch with all of you to get your fleece size and anything I can help with. We'll send you an email with attachments of the articles we mentioned. Our Wonder Woman Alumni Relations Director, Hillary Molina, lost her internet and electricity, so she's unable to jump back on this call, but she wanted to invite you all to register for the Alumni Conference, which will be virtual, and it will open for registration next week. And you can find all the information on alumni.fielding.edu. And I also wanted to share that our alumni have access to Fielding Library. If you register on alumni.fielding.edu, you automatically get limited access. And with a little membership contribution, you get additional access where you can get all Fielding monographs in PDF. You have a Fielding Library provides free access to all Fielding monographs, including this article. It has article by Dr. Wagenheim, by Dr. Steyer. Many of you have contributed to this research, and there will be many more coming up. So stay in touch. Again, thank you all. It means a lot to have trustees on the call. They work so hard for Fielding. They give generously. Our trustees give 100% participation, thanks to our leader, Dr. Bennett, and also university leadership team gives 100%. So our staff is also extremely committed. And our students, they are so grateful for the support they receive to continue their doctoral experience here at Fielding. And they also, some of them are also donors. Even though they're scholarship recipients, they also give, including during today's Giving Day. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you, Dr. Bennett, for organizing us and for memory of Dr. Seashore.
And Elena, thank you, and Hillary, for all the work that you do. The staff at Fielding are such great resources and are so committed to having us connect with Fielding and finding ways that we can continue to share and the mission of Fielding. And so thank you for all that you do. Let's all give Charlie and Edie a round of a hat. And one more thing, take yourself off mute, because I think this is a Charlie that we would do. And I'm going to say, take yourself off mute. We're going to go, woo-hoo! All right? Ready? Have a great day.
Thank you.
John.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Happy holidays.